Yes, ma'am. Biomolecules is going on.
Okay, okay. So the only part remaining is practical organic. Fine.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'll be covering that today. Is the whiteboard visible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now this chapter is there in your 11th standard NCRT book. Okay. Under the name Some Basic Concepts of Organic Chemistry.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
this is a part of the 11th standard. Fine. So now, whenever a new organic compound is discovered, what is the first thing we would like to know about the compound?
Structure.
But for the getting the structure, can I say we are supposed to know what elements are present in the compound?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now, basically, this chapter is divided into two parts. You have qualitative analysis and you have quantitative estimation. Now, what is the difference between the two? Qualitative analysis means determining the quality. Quality means finding out what elements are present in the organic compound. Quantitative means once you get the elements present in the organic compound, the next thing is to find out the percentages of these so that you can arrive at the molecular formula of the compound. Quantitative means determining the quantity. Quantity means we are determining the percentages of these elements present in the organic compound. And from the percentages, we'll be going and deriving the empirical formula. Empirical formula will then give you the empirical formula weight. From that, you can get the molecular formula of the compound. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, once the molecular formula has been derived, after that, the next thing is to find out the functional groups present in the molecule. So we go for the different tests for different functional groups. And then from that, we get the structure of the organic compound. Fine. So this is how they proceed with. So first, let us start with qualitative analysis. Qualitative analysis means finding out the elements present in the organic compound. Now, what all elements could be present in an organic compound? Organic compound will have carbon. Yes. Hydrogen may be present. Oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, halogen, and phosphorus. These are the most common elements which are present in the organic compound. So first we'll determine the what elements are present in the organic compound. Once the elements are determined, then we'll establish the percentages of these by different methods. And then from the percentages, we arrive at finally the molecular formula of the compound.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, before qualitative analysis has to be started, we have to have the organic compound in its purest form. Do you agree? Because impurities would then give us wrong results.
Yes, ma'am.
The presence of any impurities would give us wrong results. So first we need to purify the organic compound. Purification of organic compounds can be done by various methods, such as simple distillation, now this method is based on the principle of difference in boiling points. Now, if the difference in boiling point of the organic compound and the impurities is more than 30 degrees Celsius, I repeat, If the difference in boiling point of the organic compound is more than, you can say 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. If it is more than that, then we go for simple distillation. Do you know how it is carried out, simple distillation?
Yes, ma'am.
Distillation flask you must have seen. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
It's a round bottom flask. Okay, with a side arm. The side arm is then covered with a water jacket, cold water jacket. Now here you have a thermometer placed here. And in this you place your liquid mixture that is of organic compound and the impurities, and you start heating. When you start heating, what happens? The one having the lower boiling point will vaporize. That will be converted into the vapor form, and those vapors then pass through this side arm. But here you have a cold water jacket in which cold water is circulated surrounding the side arm. So what will happen to these vapors?
They will condense.
They will condense and the liquid will fall down here. So the one having lower boiling point gets collected here, and the one having higher boiling point will stay in the distillation flask. So this is a technique which we use for mixtures with difference in boiling point, and the boiling point difference should be at least minimum 25 degrees Celsius or more than that. Then we go for simple distillation. But if the difference in boiling point is smaller than 25 degrees Celsius, then we have to go for fractional distillation. Now, what is done in fractional distillation? In fractional distillation, you have a fractionating column. The instrumentation is almost same. You have a round bottom flask, but you don't have the side arm here. Instead, now this upper portion is connected to a fractionating column. And here you have the side arm. The cold water jacket surrounds that side arm. And you take the liquid mixture here. Here I can give in simple distillation, I can take an example of alcohol and water. Say ethyl alcohol and water mixture. They can be separated by simple distillation. But if I take a mixture supposing of say acetone and ethyl alcohol, the difference in boiling point for acetone and ethyl alcohol is around, I think it is 15 to 16 degrees Celsius. So here you'll have to go for fractional distillation. So here what they do is, you have the distillation flask, and here you have a fractionating column. It's a glass tube again with these grooves. Okay, these are the grooves in the glass tube, and you start heating here. What happens here is, since the difference in boiling point of acetone and ethyl alcohol is very small, what they do is, when you start heating, both of them volatilize. But then the vapor will be more richer in the more volatile component, and the amount of less volatile component will be very small here. Did you understand what I said?
Yes, ma'am.
The vapors will be richer in the more volatile component. More volatile component means the one having the lower boiling point. So the vapors will be richer in that. So as these vapors move through this fractionating column, these grooves which are present here, the one having higher boiling point, as it strikes these grooves, those molecules, they return back, they condense and they return back into the distillation flask. whereas the one which has low boiling point, which has lower boiling point means more volatile, that will pass through these grooves as well, and they will start moving through the side arm. So those molecules, when they move through the side arm in the vapor state, cold water jacket is present surrounding that. So those vapors will then condense and they'll fall down here as the liquid state. The one which has higher boiling point condenses back when it strikes these grooves, and it falls down back in the distillation flask. So the more volatile component is collected here, and the less volatile component remains in this distillation flask. So fractional distillation is to be used only when the difference in boiling point is less than 25 degrees Celsius. Then there is a method of crystallization, which can also be used to separate a mixture of organic compound and its impurities. Now, crystallization depends on what? This depends on the principle of solubility. Difference in solubility. In a given solvent. That means one substance here will dissolve and the other won't in a given solvent. Say, for example, I take a substance, an organic compound, which is soluble in hot water, and the impurity is not soluble in hot water. Then I will go for crystallization. So what is done here? They take a test tube in which they take the impure organic compound and they add hot water to that. So when hot water is added, what will happen? Can I say the organic compound which is soluble here will dissolve?
Yes, ma'am.
And the insoluble will remain as it is in the solid state. So that is then filtered off. The hot water is filtered off and the residue is discarded because residue has impurities. The filtrate is then cooled. When you cool, the organic compound was soluble in hot water, but it is insoluble in cold water. So on cooling, the crystals of the organic compound start getting formed, and then those crystals are then filtered off and dried. Did you understand the method, crystallization?
Yes, ma'am.
Like distillation, similarly in crystallization also you have two methods. You have crystallization and fractional crystallization also. In this, again, there is difference in solubility, but here one component will be more soluble than the other component. Okay, so here one component is more soluble than the other component. See, in this case, crystallization, one was soluble and the other was insoluble. But here, what is there like in fractional crystallization? Both are soluble, but to different extent. Okay, both are soluble, but to different extent. So what they do is, supposing the two compounds, both are soluble in hot water, but to different extent. That means one is more soluble in hot water and the other is less soluble in hot water. Then what is done here? You take the mixture, add hot water to it. Can I say the hot water will dissolve the one having more solubility will be present and more in hot water?
Yes, ma'am.
And the one having less solubility will dissolve less. So the residue which is left behind will definitely have what?
Ma'am, the one with less dissolve.
The one which dissolves less. So that residue is again filtered off and that hot water is cooled. तो जब hot water को cool करेंगे तो दोनों के crystals बनेंगे. दोनों मतलब the one which is more soluble and the one which is less soluble. But can I say those crystals will be richer in the more soluble component?
Yes, ma'am.
So what they do is those crystals which they have now, again they add hot water to it, but the amount of hot water added is less. So again what will happen? The more soluble component will dissolve more and the less soluble component will remain as a residue. So they keep on repeating this procedure over again and again till finally what happens is the residue will be thrown off as the impurity and the filtrate is finally cooled down and you get the component which is the more soluble component. Fine. So here the crystallization process is repeated again and again so as to separate the two components, the one which is more soluble from the one which is less soluble. Fractional crystallization technique you all have understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now the next they could use is sublimation. What is sublimation exactly?
Ma'am, the solid gets directly converted into gas.
Yes. In this case, the solid is directly converted into the gaseous form without passing through the liquid state. The solid goes into the vapor form directly without passing through the liquid state. This method of separation can be used when one component is it undergoes sublimation and the other doesn't. Say for example, iodine. You know, iodine sublimes. Or you
Yes,
can
ma'am.
have camphor. Camphor also sublimes, even naphthalene. These are compounds which undergo sublimation. Sublimation means when heated, they directly pass into the vapor state without going into the liquid form. So what is done? Supposing you have camphor and you have some other solid present as an impurity which does not sublime. So you can go for this method. So in this method, what is done? You have a porcelain dish. They also call this as China dish. It's a white colored dish made up of porcelain. In that dish, you take the solid mixture, the solid particles, and you cover this with a funnel. Okay, so this is covered with a funnel and you start heating this. The upper part of the funnel is covered with a cotton plug so that the vapors don't escape out from here. Then when you start heating, supposing the naphthalene or camphor present here, they will start moving into the vapor form. Those vapors, when they come towards this part of the funnel, this part of the funnel is cooler. So the vapors start condensing here and the solid crystallizes here back. So the solid is, what you say, you get the crystals of the solid in the funnel and the impurity remains back in the porcelain dish. The funnel is then removed and the solid is scraped off from here. That is how you get the organic compound separated from the impurity. So sublimation part you have understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now the next is you have chromatography. Have you ever heard about chromatography?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now chromatography is a method of separation based on difference in extent of adsorption. Okay, adsorption you all have done already. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
What is adsorption? When one substance distributes itself on the surface of the other rather than in its bulk, then the process is called as adsorption. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So distribution of one substance on the surface of the other rather than in its bulk is called as adsorption. But what if the substance distributes itself in the bulk of the other? Then that process is known as what?
Absorption.
Yes, that is known as absorption. So adsorption you'll find only on the surface. So it's a surface phenomenon basically. Now there are different types of chromatography. You have paper chromatography. Then you have column chromatography. You have thin layer chromatography. Then you have gas chromatography. Then you have high performance liquid chromatography. Now, all these methods of chromatography or all these techniques, they are basically dependent on the same principle, that is difference in extent of adsorption. It is only the way in which it is carried out. Paper chromatography is carried out on a filter paper. Column chromatography is carried out in a burette. Thin layer chromatography is carried out on a slide, okay, and so on. Gas chromatography, the mobile phase is the gas form, is a gas. And high performance liquid chromatography, the mobile phase again is a liquid, but it is taken under pressure. Okay. You can say high pressure also, high pressure liquid chromatography.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll just explain one of these so that at least you get a brief idea of how the process is done. Just 1 minute. Okay, is this visible to you all?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Oh God, where it went? Fine. See, now here you have a glass jar. This entire, my marker is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This is a glass jar. In that you have placed here a solvent. Okay, they have written here solvent is placed, and this is a filter paper which is connected, which is fixed at the top. Okay, so this filter paper hangs in the solvent. Now, what is done here? Supposing you have to separate out plant pigments. Plant pigments can be chlorophyll, xanthophyll, and rhodopsin, and rhodopsin. Sorry, there are various other plant pigments which can be separated using paper chromatography. So what they do is they take that plant pigment which needs to be separated into components. That plant pigment they dissolve in the solvent, the same solvent which is there here. They take and dissolve that plant pigment in the solvent, and here they place few drops of that. This is the starting point. Okay, and they place the filter paper. They add few drops of the solvent here at the starting line, and they place the filter paper in that same solvent. Now, due to capillary action, what will happen to the solvent? Can I say the solvent will start moving upwards?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the solvent will start rising. Now here in these drops, you have the plant pigments which differ in their extent of adsorption on the filter paper. So as the solvent starts rising, can I say it will start, plant pigments are soluble in the solvent, but they have difference in extent of adsorption on the filter paper. So as the solvent starts rising, it will carry along with it the plant pigments. But can I say the plant pigment which has more extent of adsorption जिसका degree of adsorption is more on the filter paper, that will move a lesser distance upwards.
Yes, ma'am.
And the one which has less extent of adsorption on the filter paper, that will travel a greater distance.
Yes, ma'am.
So supposing your green pigment, chlorophyll, has more extent of adsorption than the yellow pigment, xanthophyll. So the green pigment, can I say it will move a smaller distance and the xanthophyll will move a longer distance here?
Yes, ma'am.
So the xanthophyll will then be collected at the top and the green pigment chlorophyll will be collected here. Now the filter paper is removed from here. It is dried and then the plant pigments over here. Then this is cut out into that shape and that cut the इस शेप में कट आउट किया जाता है फिल्टर पेपर को और वो जो शेप में कट आउट किया गया है जैसे स्फेरिकल शेप है तो वो स्फेरिकल शेप पे जो कट आउट है दैट इज देन टेकन आउट एंड इट इज स्क्रेप्ड ऑफ तो जैसे ही स्क्रेप ऑफ करते हैं यू गेट द डिफरेंट प्लांट पिगमेंट सेपरेटेड आउट दिस मेथड हैव यू अंडरस्टूड
Yes, ma'am.
ओके यही चीज अगर ब्यूरेट में करते हैं ब्यूरेट में व्हाट दे डू इज दे फिल द ब्यूरेट हैव यू हर्ड अबाउट जियोलाइट्स
No, ma'am.
okay basically these zeolites are solid structures which are actually similar to beads अच्छा beads क्या होते हैं bead में can I say there is a ये central part which is hollow
Yes, ma'am.
okay now inside the central part the component one of the components supposing it is getting adsorbed here so it will get adsorbed in this cavity again here the components will differ in the degree of adsorption so degree of adsorption is different here for different components so what happens here is you take that component the mixture and you add it into this and you pass a solvent through this that solvent when it flows down can I say the one which is having higher degree of adsorption would remain at the top only but the one having less degree of adsorption that solid component would start falling down with the solvent
Yes, ma'am.
so that starts falling down and when that starts falling down with the solvent that is collected first and the solvent is volatilized उसके बाद क्या होता है धीरे धीरे और solvent add करते जाते हैं करते जाते हैं करते जाते हैं ताकि जो more जिसका extent of adsorption ज्यादा था वो भी starts getting eluted out so this is how the different fractions are then collected out so this principle is also based on the same thing the extent of adsorption the only difference lies here is it is carried out in a burette so इसको column chromatography बोलते हैं और ये एक पेपर पे किया जाता है इसलिए इसको पेपर chromatography बोला जाता है got it okay so the technique used is different the principle being same it is a difference in the extent of adsorption okay can I get back to that now
Yes, ma'am.
okay fine so these were the methods of separation of the organic compound from its impurity now once you have the pure organic compound what is the next thing you'll try to do now you start with the qualitative analysis qualitative analysis means detection of the elements present okay the elements which I said the elements which we have to go for the detection is carbon hydrogen oxygen nitrogen sulfur halogen and phosphorus now detection of carbon and hydrogen is done together in a single process okay that is known as the Liebig's method what is done here is your organic compound purified organic compound is heated with copper oxide any carbon present in the organic compound is oxidized by copper oxide into carbon dioxide. Any hydrogen present in the organic compound is oxidized by copper oxide to water. And then these are tested. How would you test carbon dioxide gas? Vapors will lime water milky. You know this test, am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So if the vapors turn lime water milky, and when you pass more of lime water, it dissolves to form calcium bicarbonate, then we confirm that it is the presence of carbon dioxide gas. Water, how it is detected? It will turn anhydrous copper sulfate blue or cobalt chloride paper turns from blue to pink. So this is how you test for carbon and hydrogen. I repeat, the organic compound is heated with copper oxide. Any carbon present in the organic compound is oxidized to carbon dioxide. Any hydrogen present in the organic compound is oxidized to water. Then these are tested. Carbon dioxide, the vapors of carbon dioxide will turn lime water milky, and that milkiness will disappear on addition of excess of lime water. And for water, hydrogen, how do you test? If it turns anhydrous copper sulfate blue or cobalt chloride paper turns from blue to pink, then we confirm that it is water. In other words, hydrogen is present in the organic compound. Carbon and hydrogen detection, you all have understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then the next is detection of nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen. This is done together under a single test, which is known as Lassinez test. Okay. So nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen are detected together using a single method, that is the Lassinez test. Now what is done here? Your organic compound is heated with sodium to red hot. Okay. So organic compound is taken in a fusion tube and heated with sodium metal to red hot. Any nitrogen present in the organic compound? अच्छा, organic compound में carbon तो होगा, sodium के साथ heat किया है, so sodium will react with the nitrogen present in the organic compound. Of course, carbon being there, it will get converted into sodium cyanide.
Yes, ma'am.
If any sulfur is there, sodium will combine with the sulfur to form sodium sulfide. If any halogen is there in the organic compound, that halogen will combine with sodium to form sodium halide. So basically, what am I doing here? Can I say I am converting the covalently bonded nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen in the organic compound to these ionic salts?
Yes, ma'am.
So now detection of these ionic salts is more simpler rather than detection of covalently bonded nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen in the organic compound. So the idea of heating with sodium is to convert these covalently bonded nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen in the organic compound to their ionic salts. Because now detection of these ionic salts is much simpler as compared to the detection of covalently bonded nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen. What if both are present, sulfur and nitrogen? If sulfur and nitrogen are present together, then both these react with sodium to form sodium thiocyanide. Okay, so now we'll go for the detection of each of these individual ones. So let us first start with the detection of nitrogen. Are you all copying this or should I?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you want me to wait?
Yes, ma'am.
Done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now we move on for the detection of nitrogen. Nitrogen has been converted into the cyanide ion. So now what is done here? See, now I'll tell you the procedure. What they do is they take the organic compound, add sodium, heat it to red hot. These reactions would occur depending on which element is present. Now that substance which they have got by heating sodium, they dissolve these solid in water. All these are water soluble, and they divide that filtrate which they have got. These have dissolved in water, and the filtrate is then divided into 4 parts. The first part is detected for nitrogen. Filtrate has been divided into 4 parts. The first part is detected for nitrogen. So they take the first part of the filtrate, and if nitrogen is there, that has formed sodium cyanide. Now to this filtrate, they add freshly prepared aqueous FeSO4. They take FeSO4 and add it to this filtrate. What happens here is you get the formation of ferrous cyanide here along with sodium sulfate. Now in the next step, what happens here is this ferrous cyanide, which is formed here, it reacts with more of sodium cyanide to form this complex. Okay. Now this complex is formed between ferrous sulfate and sodium cyanide. Now to this they add concentrated sulfuric acid and they warm the same solution. So after adding FeSO4, they add concentrated H2SO4 and they warm the solution. So when concentrated H2SO4 is added, the FeSO4 is oxidized with concentrated H2SO4 into ferric sulfate. It is oxidized into ferric sulfate. Then this ferric sulfate which has been formed, that combines with the complex present in the solution. To form this complex, which is ferroso-ferric cyanide, which is nothing but it has a Prussian blue color. Have you heard about this Prussian blue? Have you done it earlier, Prussian blue?
Ma'am, just 10 seconds.
Prussian blue I think किया हुआ ना salt analysis में.
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ. So if you get a Prussian blue color, when you add FeSO4 and sulfuric acid to the filtrate, then that confirms the presence of nitrogen in the organic compound, because this Prussian blue color will confirm the presence of cyanide ion, and cyanide ion means nitrogen will be there in the organic compound. This test you'll have understood for nitrogen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now the second part of the filtrate is tested for sulfur. Did you finish writing this?
Yes, ma'am.
1 second, ma'am.
Okay. See, I have not balanced these reactions. These are redox reactions. You know how to balance redox, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Redox reaction को ऐसे directly balance नहीं कर सकते हैं. You have to go for those oxidation to redox के methods है ना? Ion electron method.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. So detection of nitrogen is done. Then the second part of the filtrate. The test for sulfur. If sulfur is present in the organic compound that has reacted with sodium to form sodium sulfide. So now you have to test for sulfide ion. Okay. Test for sulfide ion is done how? You take that filtrate having the sodium sulfide to which you add lead acetate. If you get the formation of a black PBT of lead sulfide, that confirms the presence of sulfide ion. Okay. Or you can also use, instead of lead acetate, you can go for what is this compound known as? This is sodium nitroprusside. Sodium nitroprusside. You get the formation of this complex which shows a violet color. So formation of this violet color indicates the presence of sulfide ion. In other words, that indicates that sulfur is present in the organic compound. Finished?
Ma'am, 10 seconds, please.
Okay. You're a medical or engineering batch?
Ma'am, engineering.
JE advanced, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Ketan, I am not from an IIT. I have done my PhD.
Ma'am, PhD किस ब्रांच में?
Organic में किया है.
Okay. Done, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, revision will be there. I think it will be in the form of crash course. So I don't know timetable अभी तक crash course का बनाया है कि नहीं. So कल से अगर आपका syllabus हो गया तो I think जो भी lectures होंगे वो revision के ही होंगे ना. Okay. Now I told you the filtrate is divided into 4 parts. First part is used for nitrogen. Second part is used for sulfur. What if both are present? I say, if both are present, then can I say I'll get the formation of sodium thiocyanide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, will sodium thiocyanide give me this Prussian blue color here? No.
No,
Because
ma'am.
this is given by which ion?
Cyanide.
Cyanide ion. Will that give me a positive test for sulfide ion?
No, ma'am.
Because this test is given only by sulfide ion and not by thiocyanide ion. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Just give me a moment. Okay. So if both are there, nitrogen and sulfur, they have formed the thiocyanide ion. Thiocyanide ion cannot be detected using detection of nitrogen. Neither the detection of sulfur would give you the thiocyanide ion. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
So if the first part is detected for nitrogen and you don't get the Prussian blue color, that doesn't mean that nitrogen is absent. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Because nitrogen may be present along with sulfur. So nitrogen, if it is present along with sulfur, you're not going to get the blue, Prussian blue color here. Neither you'll get the violet color in the test for sulfur. Because SCN minus or CNS minus, it is going to give you a different test altogether as compared to the cyanide ion and the sulfide ion. So as I said, detection of nitrogen using the Prussian blue color in the detection of nitrogen and the violet color obtained here is not the confirmatory test for the presence of nitrogen and sulfur, because they may be present together, and if they're present together, you are not going to get this violet color and neither you are going to get this Prussian blue color. Till here you have understood what I've said?
Yes, ma'am.
So the third part is used for the detection of both nitrogen and sulfur if present together. So if they're present together, then they will react with sodium, giving you sodium thiocyanide. Okay. Now, how is this detected? To this third part of the filtrate, you add a ferric salt, any ferric salt. That ferric salt will react with the sodium thiocyanide to give you a blood red color of ferric thiocyanide. Okay. So formation of this blood red color here indicates that both nitrogen and sulfur are present together.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. So now we'll go for the detection of halogen. This is done?
Ma'am, just 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. One more thing. If I have a compound, supposing, say, if I have a compound, something like this. This is hydrazine. Can nitrogen be detected here using this method?
Yes, ma'am.
Will this give a Prussian blue color here? Think and answer.
No, ma'am.
Why no?
Ma'am, because cyanide ion is not present.
Yes, this cannot form cyanide ion. Carbon है ही नहीं ना इसमें. Okay, carbon होना जरूरी है तभी cyanide बनेगा. और साइनाइड होगा तब जाके प्रोशन ब्लू कलर आएगा. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
So this compound you cannot detect nitrogen using Lasseinase test because Lasseinase test में क्या होता है? The nitrogen is converted into cyanide. So carbon has to be there. Then only you'll get the cyanide ion. Right? So now we go for the fourth part. Fourth part is the detection of halogen. But before we detect halogens, we have to remove the nitrogen or sulfur if they are present. The reason being, these are interfering radicals. The cyanide ion, the sulfide ion, and the thiocyanide ion. These are interfering radicals. What do I mean by interfering radicals? So these interfere with the detection of the halide ion. How would they interfere? That also I will tell you. You know, halide ions are detected using silver nitrate.
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. But if I add silver nitrate and if cyanide ion is there in that, filtrate में मैं silver nitrate add कर रही हूँ. Halogen है अगर उसमें तो silver halide का precipitate आएगा. Do you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
But along with that, if any cyanide ion is there, that will also combine with silver nitrate, giving you a white precipitate of AgCN. So will you be able to find out कि white precipitate silver cyanide का है या silver halide का, silver chloride का है? नहीं, am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
You will just see it as a white precipitate. But that white precipitate could be either due to chloride or if nitrogen is there, so nitrogen will also give you this white precipitate of AgCN. So CN will interfere with the detection of halide ion.
Yes, ma'am.
Similarly, even sulfide ions will interfere because even sulfide ions, they combine with silver to give you a black precipitate of Ag2S. So here you will not be able to see the halide ion precipitate because if the halide ion precipitate is white and this is giving you black, you will actually get a gray color. So you will not be able to detect के halide ion है कि नहीं उसमें. Even if you have the sulfur and nitrogen present together, so they will also react with silver nitrate to give you a red precipitate. Of silver thiocyanide. So this again will detect with the this again will interfere with the detection of halide ion. So these are the interfering reactions. So before I detect the halide ion, these ions need to be removed. The cyanide ion, sulfide ion, and the thiocyanide ion. They need to be removed before you go for the detection of halide ion. How they are removed? Now I'll tell you. But just write down this first. Finish writing this?
Ma'am, just 5 seconds.
Okay.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. All of you are finished? Fine. So now these interfering reactions or radicals have to be removed before you detect first halide ion. So what is done? The fourth part of the filtrate is boiled with concentrated HNO3. So now what will this HNO3 do? Any cyanide ion present that reacts with HNO3,
When
giving you vapors of HCN. Any sulfide ion present that also will react with HNO3, giving you vapors of H2S. Any thiocyanide ion present that also combines with HNO3, giving you vapors of HCNS. So these are removed as their vapors. Okay. Now once these are removed, then you can go for the detection of halide ion. This is the removal of interfering radicals. So after boiling the filtrate with HNO3, then you add silver nitrate to that. So if any halide ion is there, that will now combine with silver nitrate to give you what? You'll get a precipitate of AgX. Now precipitate of AgX. The precipitate will differ if you have different halogens, correct?
yes, ma'am.
If the halogen is a chloride ion, then what you'll get? You'll get a silver chloride precipitate, which is what color?
White.
Yes. You get a white PPT, which is soluble in NH4OH. What if bromide ion is there?
Ma'am, I guess yellow color.
Pale yellow aata hai, which is partially soluble in. I'll make you write that. First, just complete this.
Yes, ma'am. Done, ma'am.
Okay, all of you have finished this?
5 seconds, ma'am.
Acha.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. So chloride ion, you have a white precipitate soluble in NH4OH. But if the halide ion is a bromide ion, that will react with sodium nitrate, giving you a pale yellow precipitate, partially soluble in NH4OH. And if it is a iodide, then you'll get a yellow precipitate, insoluble in NH4OH. So this is how detection of halide ion is done.
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Can I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Done.
Oh. Now, nitrogen, sulfur, and halogen have been detected. Now, which are the elements present? Carbon, hydrogen हो गया,
Ma'am, oxygen.
कार्बन हो गया, हाइड्रोजन हो गया, नाइट्रोजन, सल्फर, हैलोजन. Phosphorus detect करेंगे. There is no way to detect oxygen in an organic compound. Okay, no test actually. So what they do is they detect the remaining elements. They find out the percentages of these. If the percentages don't add to 100, then they say that oxygen is also present. And then they go for the detection of different functional groups like alcohol, aldehyde, ketone, carboxylic acids, which then further confirms the presence of oxygen. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So last is now detection of phosphorus. In this, what they do is they take the organic compound having phosphorus. Of course, we don't know whether phosphorus is there or not. So they take the organic compound and heat it with concentrated HNO3. Any phosphorus changes into the phosphate ion. Okay, phosphorus here is converted into the phosphate ion. Now to this, they add ammonium molybdate. Formation of a canary yellow precipitate. Of ammonium phosphomolybdate. Confirms the presence of phosphorus in the organic compound. Okay. Now, once these elements have been detected, then the next thing is to determine the percentages of these. In other words, now we can start with the quantitative estimation. Estimation of carbon and hydrogen is again done together. using the same method, that is Lebesgue's method. Okay, so now what is done here? You take the organic compound and weigh it. Supposing you take, say, W grams of the organic compound. Okay, you're starting with W grams of the organic compound. That organic compound is then heated with copper oxide. As we know, if carbon and hydrogen are present, they'll get oxidized to what? Carbon dioxide and water. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
This carbon dioxide is passed through lime water. Lime water is first weighed and then the gases pass through it. Can I say there is an increase in weight now because of the formation of calcium carbonate banega na, carbon dioxide pass karenge.
Yes, ma'am.
The increase in weight will be nothing but the amount of carbon dioxide. Do you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Similarly, this is passed through weighed anhydrous copper sulfate. So again, there will be an increase in weight of copper sulfate. Whatever is the increase in weight here will correspond to the weight of water in the molecule, water in the organic compound. Did you understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now let the increase in weight here say be X grams. So carbon dioxide kitna hai? X grams. और अगर water बना है, let the weight of water be Y grams. Now if I take carbon dioxide, I know that 44 grams of carbon dioxide has 12 grams of carbon. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
पर यहाँ पर कितना कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड बना है?
X.
हाँ. So X grams will have how much of carbon? So what will be the weight of carbon? Can I say it will be 12x by 44? And percentage of carbon in the organic compound will be what? Weight of carbon divided by the weight of organic compound into 100. So this will give you the percentage of carbon in the organic compound. Did you understand this?
Yes, ma'am.
Similarly now, 18 grams of water has how much of hydrogen? 2 grams, correct? But water मुझे कितना मिला है यहाँ पर? Y grams. So Y grams of water will have how much of hydrogen? So give me the weight of hydrogen here. Where should I write now? I don't have space here. Can I write here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So weight of hydrogen कितना होगा? It will be 2y by 18, which is nothing by y by 9. और percentage of hydrogen होगा weight of hydrogen divided by the weight of organic compound into 100. So this will give you the percentage of hydrogen in the organic compound.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me once you finish.
Yes, ma'am. Just 5 seconds.
Finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So estimation of carbon and hydrogen is done. Next is
Empirical formula.
नहीं बाकी सारे elements पहले करने हैं ना.
Yes, ma'am.
Estimation of nitrogen. Now estimation of nitrogen can be done by any of these two methods. You have the Dumas method and you have the Geldahl's method. So you have the Dumas and the Geldahl's method. What is done in Dumas method? In Dumas method, all the nitrogen present in the organic compound is converted to N2. All the nitrogen present in the organic compound is converted to N2 by heating it with copper oxide. So this nitrogen gas is then collected and the volume is measured. So let the volume be VML. Using the relation PV is equal to nRT. If they have given me the pressure at which the process is carried out, the pressure of nitrogen, the R we know already, it's a gas constant. T is the temperature of the reaction. Can I calculate the number of moles of nitrogen here?
Yes, ma'am.
Number of moles will be PV by RT. Number of moles, means can I get the weight?
Yes, ma'am.
Weight of nitrogen will be number of moles into its molecular weight. Molecular weight क्या है N2 का?
28.
So what will be the percentage of nitrogen? That will be the weight of nitrogen divided by the weight of organic compound multiplied by 100. समझा ये?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think this method you have understood. Now I'm going for the Geldahl's method.
Done, ma'am.
Okay. Geldahl's method में क्या करते हैं? All the nitrogen in the organic compound is converted into ammonia. Okay. So nitrogen is converted into ammonia here. I don't know how much nitrogen is there in the organic compound. So can I say I don't know how much ammonia is going to get formed?
Yes, ma'am.
So what they do is to this ammonia, they add excess of H2SO4. The ammonia which is formed here will react with H2SO4 to form ammonium sulfate. But sulfuric acid is added in excess. Say I'm adding these many equivalents of sulfuric acid, N1V1. ये excess में add किया है. So can I say some part of sulfuric acid will react with ammonia and there'll be unused H2SO4 also?
Yes, ma'am.
That unused H2SO4 is back titrated using NaOH. Okay. So जो unused H2SO4 है, that is back titrated using NaOH. Supposing the equivalence of NaOH used are N2V2. So could you give me the equivalence of sulfuric acid reacted with ammonia? I'm adding how many equivalents?
N1V1.
उसमें से NaOH के साथ कितने रिएक्ट हुए हैं?
N2V2.
तो अमोनिया के साथ कितने रिएक्ट होंगे? I have taken excess जो unused है, मतलब जो अमोनिया ने यूज नहीं किया है.
Ma'am, N1 minus N2.
हाँ, N1V1 minus N2V2. So these are the equivalents of sulfuric acid reacted with ammonia. क्योंकि मैंने इतने इक्वालेंट्स ऐड किए हैं, उसमें से इतने इक्वालेंट्स NaOH के साथ रिएक्ट कर रहे हैं, तो बाकी के जो बचे हुए इक्वालेंट्स हैं, they have reacted with ammonia. Do you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now these are the equivalents of sulfuric acid reacted with ammonia. In other words, these are the equivalents of ammonia. Equivalents of ammonia भी same ही रहेंगे, N1V1 minus N2V2. In fact, equivalents of nitrogen भी same रहेंगे. That is N1V1 minus N2V2. ये मुझे मिले हैं equivalents of nitrogen. So how to get the weight of nitrogen? Weight of nitrogen will be number of equivalents of nitrogen multiplied by its equivalent weight. Equivalent weight of nitrogen is 14. So this gives you the weight of nitrogen. What will be the percentage of nitrogen? Weight of nitrogen divided by the weight of organic compound into 100. Did you understand this calculation?
Yes, ma'am. Done, ma'am.
हो गया सबका?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So estimation of nitrogen has been done. Carbon, hydrogen is already done. Now sulfur, halogen, phosphorus. उनका estimation बाकी है. Estimation of sulfur is done using Carius method. Here all the sulfur in the organic compound is oxidized to sulfate ion by a series of reactions. Then to this they add barium chloride and they get a precipitate of barium sulfate. This precipitate they dry it and weigh it. Let the weight of the precipitate be say A grams. Weigh करने के बाद A grams मिला है आपको precipitate. Now barium sulfate का molecular mass आता है 233. So can I say 233 grams of barium sulfate will have 32 grams of sulfur?
Yes, ma'am.
So A grams of barium sulfate will have how much of sulfur? Weight of sulfur क्या हो जाएगा? 32A by 233. Percentage of sulfur in the organic compound will be weight of sulfur divided by the weight of organic compound multiplied by 100. समझा?
Yes, ma'am.
Estimation of halogen also I'm writing here. That is also done using Carius method only. Here all the halogen in the organic compound is converted into silver halide. You get a precipitate of silver halide. Supposing the halogen is chlorine. So I'll get a precipitate of
AgCl.
let the weight be say B grams. Okay. Now in AgCl, AgCl का molecular mass होता है 143.5. 143.5 grams of AgCl will have 35.5 grams of chlorine. So B grams of AgCl will have how much of chlorine? Weight of chlorine कितना होगा? It will be 35.5 B divided by 143.5. And percentage of chlorine will be what? I'm writing here. Weight of chlorine divided by the weight of organic compound into 100. Instead of chlorine, if I have bromine, you know what is the atomic mass of bromine? Bromine का atomic mass 80 होता है और iodine का 127 होता है. They won't be giving you these masses. You're supposed to remember.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is done. Finished?
Ma'am, just 5 seconds.
Okay.
Done, ma'am.
Fine. Now last is estimation of phosphorus. This also is done using Carius method only. Here, all the phosphorus in the organic compound is converted to a precipitate of magnesium pyrophosphate. This is magnesium pyrophosphate. Magnesium pyrophosphate का molecular mass है 222 grams. Okay. अब let the mass of magnesium pyrophosphate be C grams. So 222 grams of this has phosphorus is 31. दो phosphorus है तो 62. So magnesium pyrophosphate has 62 grams of phosphorus. 222 grams is 62. So C grams of magnesium pyrophosphate will have how much of phosphorus? Weight of phosphorus will be 62 into C divided by 222. Percentage of phosphorus will be 62C divided by weight of organic compound multiplied by 100.
Done, ma'am.
The percentages have been determined. From this, you know how to find out the empirical formula. You must have done it in mole concept.
Yes, ma'am.
Empirical say they derive the molecular formula, molecular weight, molecular formula. Molecular weight तो देते हैं वो, या तो फिर they give you the vapor density. So then you
Yes,
can
sir.
find out the molecular formula of the compound. Once molecular formula is established, then they go for the identification of different functional groups and they get the structure of the molecule. Fine.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
this is how it is done. This was the last part. So your chapter is done. ठीक है? कुछ भी
Yes.
difficulty आया इसमें?
No,
अच्छा
ma'am.
एक और चीज before I leave. Geldahl's method converts nitrogen into what?
Ammonia.
So if I have a compound something like this, what is this compound?
Diazonium ion.
Diazonium ion.
Diazonium mein this will never get converted into ammonia. So Geldahl's method cannot be used for this. This has to be used for detection of nitrogen. Here you have to go for Dumas, not for gel. No, it cannot be detected using Geldahl's because here nitrogen will be eliminated out as what? It will be eliminated as N2, na?
Yes, ma'am.
So Geldahl's method cannot be used for diazonium. Neither it can be used for azo compounds. Azo compounds also, they undergo elimination of N2. So azo compounds and diazonium are detected using Dumas only. Geldahl's cannot be used for this. So just make a note of this. Fine. Any questions still here? Chapter is understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Fine. Okay. Polymers and chemistry in everyday life will be done in other batch. Yes, I think there's. कौन से सर ले रहे हैं आपको organic?
BYC sir. Virendra Yadav
So I
sir.
think he'll complete that. Fine. Chemistry in everyday life वैसे तो हम self study के लिए ही देते हैं. All professors give it for self study. Polymers, I think he'll be completing. Okay. Fine. Anything else you want to ask? Any doubts? कुछ पूछना है?
यस मैम। मैम अगर पॉलीमर्स के बारे में थोड़ा ज्यादा पढ़ना रहेगा तो आप क्या कर सकते हैं? मतलब मैम आफ्टर जेई।
अच्छा, आपको उसमें आगे पढ़ना है?
हाँ मैम, मतलब पॉलीमर्स के बारे में थोड़ा सा जानना था, इससे हमें पढ़ना है।
You want to do your what you say, graduation in that particular topic or something?
नो मैम, मतलब ग्रेजुएशन तो नहीं करना है, बट मतलब ऐसा पढ़ना रहेगा ना, तो ऐसा कुछ मतलब पढ़ने की थोड़ा मनाही है, तो वही मतलब जस्ट पूछना था।
अच्छा अच्छा, तो पॉलीमर्स का आई थिंक देखो, पहले तो पॉलीमर्स जेई मेंस में ही आता है, जेई एडवांस में तो पूछेंगे नहीं कुछ पॉलीमर्स के बारे में।
यस मैम।
तो आप अगर एनसीईआरटी करें तो जेई मेंस के लिए प्रिपेयर हो, बट इफ यू वांट टू रीड थ्रू then I think you'll have to go for some reference book on polymers.
आप नाम बता सकते हैं क्या, जो मतलब जेई के बाद हम लोग ऐसा रेफर कर सकता हूँ मैं?
पॉलीमर्स के लिए इसमें चले जाओ ना, क्या बोलते हैं, सोलोमन एंड फ्राइल में मिल जाएगा आपको पॉलीमर्स।
ओके मैम।
उसमें ज्यादा दिया हुआ है, एनसीईआरटी से काफी ज्यादा है। सोलोमन एंड फ्राइल में है पॉलीमर्स। यस
यस मैम।
ठीक है।
यस मैम।
Even Morrison and Boyd will have it. ठीक है।
यस
So,
मैम।
okay, I'm done with today's session. Can I end the class now?
यस मैम।
Okay. Chalo, bye all of you. All the
थैंक यू
best.
मैम।
Yes. Bye bye.